Recently, an old nun sent me bits of wisdom called Things I Learned from My Mother. Many of these things I read on that list brought back memories. These included, I learned logic from my mother when she said to me, "Because I said so, that's why." I learned religion from my mother when she said to me, "You'd better pray that comes up off the carpet." I learned irony from my mother when she said to me, "Just keep on crying and I'll give you something to cry about." I learned time travel from my mother when she said to me, "If you don't straighten up, I'm going to knock you into the middle of next week." I learned stamina from my mother when she said to me, "You sit there until all the spinach is gone." I learned osmosis from my mother when she said to me, "Shut your mouth and eat your supper." I learned contortionism from my mother when she said, "Just look at that dirt on the back of your neck." And I learned justice from my mother when she said, "If you have kids, I hope they turn out just like you." Our mothers were generally our first teachers. Jesus is the teacher too, but he is always teaching the same thing. Jesus must have been a disappointing teacher to those around him. He didn't teach what those good, pious people wanted to hear. They wanted to be taught lists of complicated, deep doctrines, things they could fight about and call each other heretics about in case of disagreement. They wanted to feel they were being taught. Teach us, give us a list of doctrines. And Jesus smiled and said, "Love one another." The people wanted long lists of rules. They wanted a complicated morality system. They wanted commandments so that they could be proud of themselves when they succeeded in keeping one of them and could condemn anyone else who didn't. "Give us rules," they said. And Jesus smiled and said, "Love one another." They said, "We want gold. We want power. Kick these Romans out. Tell us who to vote for." Jesus smiled and said, "Love one another." They said, "Tell us whom to ostracize. Tell us whom to condemn. Tell us whom to hate." Religious people love that. And Jesus smiled and said, "Love one another." They said, "Oh, but other leaders, other teachers, give us long lists of things. What are you going to give us?" And like a broken record, Jesus said, "Love one another." Then he said, "You will remain in my love if you keep my commandments. And here is my commandment." And with much excitement they said, "Finally, something we can sink our teeth into. Finally, you're giving us something. What are those commandments?" And he smiled and said, "Love one another." They were looking for power. They were looking for gold. But these things cannot last. Jesus gave to them and to us the only thing that does last: love one another. 100 years ago, in 1923, one of the greatest American poets, Robert Frost, wrote about things that stay and things that don't stay. "Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. And then leaf subsides to leaf. So Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day. Nothing gold can stay." We look for gold, for wealth, for power. Yet nothing gold can stay. The only thing that remains, the only thing worth remaining in, is love. The only commandment that Christ gave us, his only rule, is the simplest, yet the most difficult and the most profound. love one another. One day, a Jewish friend asked me to name one good thing Christianity has brought to humanity. Just name one, he said. Was it perhaps the slaughter wrought by the Crusades? No, I replied. Perhaps it was the Inquisition, forcing other people to believe the way you believe and torturing and killing them if they didn't. Is the world a better place because of this? No, I said. Well, what about those pompous church leaders and their sumptuous palaces and designer shoes? Out of touch with reality, out of touch with humanity. Have they made a positive difference in this world? No, I said. And what about all those wars throughout the ages waged in the name of Christianity? Has all that bloodshed made this world a better place? No, I admitted, they haven't. And what about those church leaders who line themselves with the powers that be, with the rich elements of society, with military governments oppressing the poor and keeping them down? Is the world a better place because of them? Certainly not, I said. What about all those noble ancient civilizations wiped off the face of the earth by the Christian armies to make room for what they were bringing? Is the world a better place because of that? I just shook my head and said, "You are right, my friend. But for every religious leader in a palace and designer shoes, I can show you a St. Francis with no shoes at all and living in the street. For every religious leader in league with the forces of money and power and military, I can show you armies of sisters and lay people and good priests and brothers who are out there with the poor and the oppressed, not merely preaching, but living a theology of true liberation. For every tear that Christendom has brought to the world with power, I can show you a host of good sisters working quietly, drying tears and healing wounds. Because you see, my friend, in every age and in every institution, there are enlightened people. People who grasp and live the message of love that Jesus grasped and taught. And that, my friend, is the church. At the end of the day, what remains? Nothing gold can stay. No powers can stay. List of rules pass away. At the end of the day, the only religion worth professing, the only mother worth the name, is the one who shows us what it is to love.